welcome or welcome back to the Night Sky Knitting Podcast. My name is Rachel, I am your host, and I am a knitter based in Ottawa, Canada, and this channel is my chatty outlet to talk all things crafts, but actually almost exclusively knitting. Today is Monday, June 27th. For some reason I almost said December, and it's been about almost 5 weeks since I last recorded because I have been very sick and very busy. I finished up a summer intensive course in the evenings on top of working full-time 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, and then I was also really sick for about 2 weeks. And the symptoms of that included not being able to speak, literally nothing came out for about 6 days. And also my eyes were really red and scary, and overall it just wasn't a good situation for filming. And I also turned 25 in, the time since I last filmed a podcast. And so overall I've been a busy bee. And I've accumulated, despite that, a whole lot of stuff to show you and talk about. And so I'm thinking I'm going to film a video today to talk about the projects from the first 2.5 weeks of the period I've been away, and then barring any other unforeseen circumstances preventing me from filming again, do another podcast episode next week to catch you up on my more current projects, because I think that if I try and film all of it in one go, I will push my thread a little bit too far and also run out of energy, and the quality will decline by the end. And also it'll be like a 2-hour video, and I think that's too much. So without further ado, I think it's time that I jump into knitting recap time. Oh, but before actually I do that, thank you so much for 2,000 subscribers. I'm a little bit blown away. I feel like we hit 1,000 subscribers yesterday, which was already pretty shocking to me. And I really appreciate all of you guys being here, and thanks to anyone who's ever shouted me out, referenced me on their channel, told other people to come and watch, and thank you for everyone who's ever clicked on one of my videos, subscribed, liked a video, and stuck around. I really appreciate all the things that the knitting community has given me in terms of giving me a community and an outlet, and so many wonderful friendships and relationships and knowledge, and thanks, just from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate it. But you're here to listen to me talk about knitting, so we will do that. Rewind the clock and the calendar and pretend it is the last 2 weeks of May. First thing I finished was the second wild strawberry sock, which is a pattern, which is this one. This is the full pair sock, but this is the second one. I changed the little leaf pattern a bit. Nope, this is the second one. I changed the little leaf pattern a bit, and the gusset decreases a little bit, and I finished my socks. So this is the wild strawberry sock. It is a self-drafted pattern by me from my brain because I like wild strawberries, and I had this yarn, and it seemed to be a very good use for it, and I love colorwork socks. Anyone who's been here before knows I love colorwork socks. Working on these off and on for a while, these kind of kept getting pushed to the back burner because it's really easy to push projects for me off to the side when other things, little ones for me, off to the side when I have gift knits that I want to complete or that have a little bit more of the time pressure associated with them, or I'm working on a sweater project. A, because these are not urgent. I always need socks, but I never urgently need a particular pair of socks. And B, as much as I love knitting socks, I find that they kind of hurt my elbows a little bit more than the average sweater project or hat project or anything that's on a larger needle, because with the thin yarn and the thin needles and the fact that I have really bad eyes means that I find myself so consciously moving the needles and the work closer and closer to me so I can see a little bit better, but then my elbows are turned inwards, and I have found that that is what really aggravates them and causes pain and discomfort when I'm knitting. And so I'm on a mission to improve my posture and stretch more and knit resting my forearms and my wrists on tables to avoid turning them in and causing problems. But with socks, it's kind of an uphill battle because I just can't see very well, especially at night. So I want them right here so I can see my stitches. But all of this to say, I've started to figure out how to reduce pain and make sure I don't injure myself or cause genuine problems when I'm knitting obsessively, as I do, because I don't know restraint or moderation. I finished my socks. I love these. I wrote down the instructions very loosely and I made some improvements on the second sock, but I am not a designer. I'm a hobby knitter, and maybe if I, one, figure out how to fix the color work issue that I have, getting the pattern to be just quite right once I finish the decreases, which is bugging me, but I'm not a math person, so it's not immediately clear to me how to fix it. And if I don't know, if I'm suddenly feeling confident one day, maybe I'll release this as a pattern. But designing, I don't think, is really going to be part of this hobby for me, at least right now. I don't want to ever say, never say never, but I don't know, I feel like if I'm going to do it, I want to really do it right, and I don't feel like I'm necessarily at a place where I can really do it right. So yeah, I made little wild strawberry socks with a little fleece stitch pattern and some color work and twisted rib cuff. I have the little red recording line dot that I normally look at on this side, and normally that's what I try and focus on because I can't see very well, but you guys and the actual camera lens are on this side, and so I keep going to show things over here, but you guys are over here. Anyway, first finished object. Did these back in May. They're super comfortable. They were so much fun because I like colorwork socks, and I'm really happy that I was able to use my never-ending Amano Chosky sock yarn to make something that makes me really happy, which are these little guys. So, finished object number 1. Finished object number 2, you will also remember from my last episode. You might recall, I finished a Streamlined tank by 2 of Wands for my mother in Lion brand Kobu, which is a cotton rayon from Bamboo Blend, which is a DK. It's a pretty nice yarn in my opinion and decently affordable. And I accidentally bought way too much. I had a full skein and a half, or full ball and a half left. And I was in Toronto and I didn't pack enough knitting, so I immediately cast on using leftovers of that yarn to knit a white, I think it's Summer Secret little crop top by Jessie May of Jessie Made Designs, the non-ribbed one, the plain stockinette one. And my gauge was off, so I knit it a size up for what is recommended for my bust size. My bust size is I have exactly a 34-inch circumference bust, which is 86 centimeters, and a 30-inch underbust, and I'm like 5'1" 3/4. I try and always say that kind of thing beginning of every one of my videos, but I often forget. But those are a rough idea of my measurements to give you an idea of like what frame you're looking at, because I know it can be really hard to tell on a screen. However, this recommended size for that is a small, but I went up to a medium because I had a whole bunch more stitches for the stitch gauge than was recommended, and I thought, okay, yeah, that happened the last time, and then I knit 2 sizes up and it was really, really baggy, and so I actually ended up knitting the same stitch count for a size small but with a completely different gauge, and I don't know how that worked out, but it did. But I thought, that's not going to happen again. That was a weird one-time thing. So I thought, knitted a size medium. It might be a little bit loose, but that might be a really nice, beachy, airy, loose, flowy tank top as opposed to a bunch of my more fitted tank tops, both hand knit and store-bought. And I knit pretty much all of it. I was just trying it on after finishing the shaping for the kind of halter neck and about to bind off and put on the sleeves, and I tried it on for the first time because it was a pretty low stakes project. It wasn't something that I was really concerned about the fit for, and it was just really nice to have like a knit stitch project over and over again and to know that I was using up scrap yarn. And it was too big, but not big enough to be like loose and beachy and intentionally so. The ribbing on the back that you do for about an inch before you bind off and then start shaping the front just kept flipping over because it was too loose, and it just kind of looked like saggy as opposed to easy breezy beautiful CoverGirl. And so I wasn't quite sure what to do with it. I sat in the corner for a couple days, and then I realized I could just give it to a friend of mine who does typically wear a traditional North American medium. I messaged this particular friend, no pressure, feel free to say no if you don't want this, I will not be offended, but would you like a white cropped halter top? I'm making one now. And then I sent her the little photo on the project page for the particular tank top. And she said, yeah, it's funny you say so, I'm actually in the market. I've been looking for some more crop tops for this summer. And I said, great, I will make it for you. And she said, no pressure. And then we did the back and forth for a bit, but I was already mostly done. So what I did was I frogged all of the front portion, the last couple sections of shaping and the ribbing on the back. So it was like to about 7 inches of just plain and in the stockinette in the round. And I knit it for me about 8.5 inches from the armpit to the bottom hem, which is good for me and my torso and where I want things to fit with all my high-waisted pants. But my friend is 5'8", which is significantly taller than me, and even if most of that height disparities in our legs, her torso still is just simply longer than mine. So I frogged it to the point where it just made sense to add another 2 inches of stockinette. Then I did the inch of ribbing, and overall it ended up being, I think, 2.5–3 inches longer than mine. Did the front shaping again and gave it to her. So here is a video of me showing this off to the camera before I gave it to her about 2 weeks ago. If I look sickly, it's because I was. And yeah, that's my second finished object. My friend texted me the next day thanking me and saying that it fit really well, which I really hope is true and not just her saying so to make me feel better. Not the kind of person who would normally do that kind of thing, so I'm really hoping it's right. And I told her when I gave it to her, tell me if there's anything wrong with the fit, because otherwise I'm just going to keep making garments that probably have that same fit error and then both of us lose. But she says that it fit really well, which makes me happy. And that just was overall kind of a winner of a project. It was something that at the time was really what I wanted to knit because I had a lot of meetings at the time, and plain stockinette was really, really good. It was fast. I got, like a good productive use out of the yarn and the enjoyment of the knitting. And then I was able to give it to a friend who says that she really likes it instead of just having it kind of contribute to my clutter, because my great dilemma is that I love stuff, but I hate clutter. And those two impulses are just kind of constantly at war. But when I finished that tank top, I still had yarn left over. Well, okay, here's the thing. I do this thing a lot where I finish something and I have yarn and I think, oh, I could use this to make XYZ little scrap project. That's great. But then I almost never reach to start one of those little scrap projects. I always start a new pair of socks or a new top or a new sweater. I don't go and knit a bunch of face cloths or scrunchies or, I don't know, gift tree ornaments or anything like that unless there's immediately an impetus for one, like I'm giving it as a gift and I have a deadline, I'm gonna start that now. I'm not very good at just kind of casting on scrap projects. And so what I did immediately upon binding off that tank top and weaving in the ends was cast on with the same needles and start a grandma's, sorry, it's been folded. What is this? Grandma's Perfect dishcloth? Grandma's Easy dishcloth? Grandma's Basic dishcloth? It'll be linked down below, but I'm pretty sure everyone has made one of these or at least seen a variation of it. It's a very common beginner project or first knitting project, and I've knit one of these before for my mother, also using Lion Brand Kobu. And I did this on a 4mm needle, so I guess I went down 1 needle size from the tank top. But this was just a really good palette cleanser. And palette cleanser because A, it made me feel really good that I was immediately using my scrap yarn as opposed to thinking, oh, I know something that I could do with that, but then casting on another pair of socks instead. And this took me, about a day of very chill, very potato chippy knitting, which was just honestly a really good palette cleanser after finishing the socks, finishing the tank top, to knit something quickly, get it done, use the yarn, not have it go in the closet, not have it go in the closet of yarn and kitchen supplies that don't fit downstairs, and get something that's really useful, because even though I always think for a number of my plant-based yarns, oh, that would be a really great washcloth, I never knit them for myself. I only knit them when there is some reason to, usually as a gift for somebody else. So now I finally have one. And this was good because by time I finished the white tank top and wanted to knit this, I had come down with my mystery virus. It wasn't COVID. I tested negative 3 times, so did my roommate. Wasn't the right symptoms, but just so you know, I wasn't going around town spreading COVID. But I kind of couldn't get out of bed and I couldn't see very well because there was an eye component to the virus and my brain was a little foggy. So it was just really, really great to just make a garter stitch washcloth with some eyelets, make it a little square. And also it made me realize that I didn't really have any good washcloths when I needed to clean my eyes and apply the ointment. I'm sorry, but that's my truth. And so I made this and I'm really happy with it, except then I didn't use it because I was keeping it clean and off to the side for when I filmed this podcast, which ended up being like 2.5, 3 weeks later, so another finished object. And then I still had yarn left over. I got 3 balls of Lion Brand Kobu, made 2 medium tank tops in that, 1 little washcloth, and then I immediately crocheted 2 face rounds for the same reason that I made the washcloth, to, take eye makeup off or take like a little face mask, a skincare mask off, because again, I wasn't going to put this tiny amount of yarn back into stash. I've made well over like 20 or 30 of these for other people, but none for myself. And I used every last bit of this yarn as a result and made some things that I keep meaning to, but then don't do. So those are my first 4 finished objects. The tank top, this guy, these 2. And at this point, I was really thoroughly on a stash busting, scrappy project kick. It coincided with a bit of a rush of belated spring cleaning. I mean, not belated here in Canada. Spring only really starts in May. But as you can see, maybe you've already noticed, maybe you don't care at all, over here, it's kind of changed decorations because I finally hung up, what am I doing? What is this? 2 of these things that have been just on the floor or around since I moved in because I was too scared to put holes in the wall. And I don't know, we've just been doing a lot of redecorating, cleaning around the apartment, and that energy and that feeling and gardening really transferred to my knitting. And then I thought, what are some scrappy projects I could do? And if you are an older viewer, if you've seen my November podcast, I started a Pom-pom garland project where I took a whole bunch of bits and bobs left over from previous projects and started making a bunch of pom-poms to de-stress from midterms. And once the initial push and big spurt of momentum, sounds like my roommate just finished work for the day and is off to the living room, I kind of lost steam on that. And those pom-poms and the yarn I'd put aside to continue making more of them and the little pom-pom maker have just been sitting in a paper bag in the corner for months. To the point where they just kind of became part of the wall, which is no good. And so I turned one day and I saw them with fresh eyes and I thought, no more of this. And so I spent a leisurely afternoon one Saturday just kind of finishing that, going through all those little bits and butts of scrap yarn, making them into pom-poms, and I finished that project and hung it up. So here's a video of it. This is directly to, I mean, your right, but my left, like right over there, like that's where this is, and you guys are here. And I spent so much time trying to pair colors nicely to create a nice cohesive garland, and because I hung them up on my window, they're backlit the whole time and it really hides the colors, so that was kind of unnecessary, and I really could have used almost any color. I think it would have been fine, but I'm really happy with this project. It looks very homemade, but in a kitschy, homey, charming way for me, and it very much fits with the design and the kind of theme of the room, and it makes me really happy. And it used up so much scrap yarn. Pom-poms just in general for me seem to take up a lot of scrap yarn, and I also chose to make a bunch of really big pom-poms. And I had a paper bag full of it, and then by the time I was done, I'd used up pretty much all of it. And I'm very, very pleased with that project. My room feels a lot less cluttered with random stuff, having that bag and these things off the floor and on the walls. And that's something that had been in the back of my mind as something that I started but really wanted to complete, but then kind of just kept putting it off for literal months. So that was my next thing. And that day, as I was sitting on the living room floor making pom-poms, one of you guys, a viewer, messaged me on Instagram with a video of someone who had knit a little frog plushie and knit him a little sweater and then made a very cute video of it that had started to go a little bit viral and has since, I think, gone very viral in terms of knitting, TikTok, Reels, etc. And with the message saying, oh, I saw this and I thought you'd really like it. And I watched it and I did really like it. And so I responded saying, I did really like it. Thank you for sending. And I went back to my pom-poms. And then 7 hours later, I was looking at this skein of leftover drops alpaca in this like mottled mossy green in stash and thinking, what am I going to use with this? It's kind of too nice to be a pom-pom, but it's too yellow toned or too warm toned of a green for me to want to wear against my skin, because typically warm toned things kind of wash me out or make me look a little sickly or jaundiced. And it hit me. That color green would be perfect for a frog. And I was also pretty sure that Drops Alpaca was one of the recommended yarns, or one of the yarns that was used in the sample of the little frog, which is the frog pattern by Claire Garland, I think aka Dot Pebbles is her knitting handle. Once again, everything will be linked down below. And I thought, no, what are you gonna do with a little frog? But then I thought, it's perfect, and this yarn has been sitting in stash for, at this point, a year, because I received it for my birthday last year. And I was in the midst of kind of the weeds of just a ton of back and forth stuck in at like knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one. And I mean, I'll talk about that with a future project, but I was just kind of sick of it and I needed a little bit of something small with a lot of shaping. I wanted a knitting project that was going to really occupy my brain and be kind of its own activity, not something that I do while I'm watching TV and knitting in the round or on a video call with friends or whatever. I wanted a focused knitting project, something that I was really paying attention. And so I cast on Frog, and here he is. Is he not divine? Is he not perfect? I think he's perfect. He sits now as decor in one of our shared spaces. I think he's amazing, and I will not hear a word otherwise. And I will say, this little guy is so much fun to knit. I love him. I love making him. I love walking by him every single day. When it gets cold, I am going to knit him a sweater, and my roommates love him too, and they were so excited. Because he's just so silly and so cute, and he's like, the thing I really like about this designer's patterns, and I've had a couple of hers favorited for a while, Claire Garland, but I never really had the right combinations of yarns to make these like more realistic but really cute stuffies. I don't know why my voice just cracked, but I mean my throat's still a little off. And Until Frog. And so he is knit with 2 strands of drops alpaca in this mossy green, held double, and then 2 strands of drops sisu, not drops, Sandnes garn sisu for his belly. And then I got 2 safety eyes for a realistic frog experience. And he took me about 2 days to knit, but 2 days that I really, really enjoyed. So his whole body, front and back, took me about 2 hours, not including the seaming. And the attention to detail that goes into him is so much fun. And maybe when you first open the pattern, it's kind of intimidating because it's a lot of pages, because almost every row has its own instruction. But if every row is only like 6 stitches, then it goes by really, really quickly. And so knitting his whole body was an incredibly engaging 2 hours. I don't even think I was listening to music. I was just knitting Frog. So his name is Frog, but his name is also Albert. And he really, really just, I think, fulfilled several knitting, crafting cravings. Is that a weird thing to say? That I had at the time, which was to use this scrap yarn, which had kind of been languishing and I was getting a little bit antsy about, to have a really good palette cleanser knit from, it really just felt like miles and miles of back and forth knitting and purling in a variety, split between like 4 different projects. And also I have an overflowing tin of, like, calling them scraps would be generous. You know when you have woven in an end and you have like 2 inches left of yarn that you snip? I don't like throwing those out because I know that I could use them as stuffing. So, or when you have like 4 inches left, you've won a game of yarn chicken and you have the smallest amount of yarn left. And I have been saving those in a tin since I started knitting and crocheting, so like a year and a half. And when I was crocheting, I would make a few more plushies, but then I moved into knitting, and I've just accumulated so many scraps that it was kind of getting really messy. They were overflowing, they're kind of spilling onto my bedside table and my floor, and I just kept not thinking, like, finding anything good that I wanted to make that actually seemed like they'd be fun to make, and then I would have something to do with them, because I don't really know any children. I'm at a point when I don't really hang out with kids anymore, and my friends haven't started having kids, so most plushies kind of didn't make sense to make. And anyway, all of this to say is Frog worked because he is stuffed with yarn scraps, and if you've ever stuffed anything before, I find that it always takes more than you think, so there's kind of a substantial amount of yarn tucked in here. He was so much fun to knit, like so much fun to knit, and he truly makes me so happy every time I walk by him. My roommates too, they're like, why don't we move him by the plants? Why don't we move him over here? I want him to go sit there. I want him to go sit here. So yeah, he's a little boy on the move. I highly recommend this pattern. I know when I purchased this pattern, there was a frog and rat or ratty. There was a buy one, get one free deal for those two. Like they were packaged together for the price of one. Because of the viral video, the designer put a discount code on so you could knit Frog and the matching sweater from the video for the price of just Frog. So I also have a little rat pattern, and depending on how current projects go, if I have enough scrap yarn that seems like it would make a nice cute little a nice cute sort of realistic rat plushie, I might make one of those two in honor of the rat that lives in the alley. So yeah, so I made Frog. I loved him, and I think this did prove to me that he is definitely wonky. I kind of lost the plot a little bit when I was making his limbs because it was a day later, and you can kind of tell, but he still makes me so happy. My little guy. Sorry, we had to stop for a little church bell interlude, but I have my eye on a number of her rabbit and owl patterns, and now that I know that I enjoy this kind of thing and that this works very well as a palette cleanser and a really engaging knit, and that I find so much joy in both making them and having them around the house, I think I will be making one of the rabbits and one of the owls, depending on how much and what scrap yarns I have in some of the more realistic or natural color yarns that I have. I have a couple beige and a couple gray projects currently on the go or planned. And so because I think actually a lot of the charm in her patterns comes from how well designed and thought out they are, but I really, really like the ones that include textured yarn and colored yarn that make it look like an actual owl or an actual rabbit. And that's why I haven't really knit any of her patterns before, even though I thought they would be great stash busters, is because most of my yarn choices up until recently have been not super natural or animal colors, purples and deep reds and, things like that have not really been it didn't seem like a good fit for, a little rabbit. But I'm looking forward to making more of her patterns soon, and I think they are so reasonably priced considering the level of detail and attention that it seems like go into them. So count me a Claire Garland fan, looking forward to hanging propping up a little owl somewhere up high, like on a bookshelf in our apartment or something if my roommates let me. And Frog was a success as far as I'm concerned. Yes, he certainly looks jankier than many other of his brothers and sisters that you see online, but I love him, and I think he's perfect. And kind of also in the background or intermittently between and during all of these projects, all of these smaller, faster stash busting projects, I have continued work on my field day jacket by Haley Smedley Smedley. I think it's Smedley, of Ozetta Knitwear, which now has sleeves. See, this is one of the beige yarns I'm thinking, if I have any amount left over, would be a really nice rabbit or maybe like a barn owl. But I am playing a game of Yarn Chicken, so I'm not getting my hopes too high up for that. But because I'm playing a game of Yarn Chicken, I finished the ball of yarn that I had attached when I joined everything for the body, the front and back panels. And so I just worked that until it was done. Then I put stitches on hold and picked up and did each sleeve, which I accidentally knit. Well, they might end up blocking out to be perfect. And you guys know I don't like very long sleeves. I have short arms already. I've lived a lifetime of rolling up my sleeves, and I prefer not to on my things that I make for myself. But as you can see, because of the way I just put the body stitches on hold in the middle of a row when I ran out of yarn. Because I was like, okay, I'll just, spit splice and pick it up right back here. But that was a little bit short-sighted because it meant that I couldn't try it on to get a good idea of the sleeve length when I was working on them. I just kind of put it against myself and thought that it was working. So right now, the sleeves are like here, which is a little bit shorter than what our sleeve actually should be for this kind of heavy winter cardigan. And right now it's a fun little shrug. And I'm not too concerned because I'm pretty sure that this kind of 100% wool worsted spun will be not very hard to stretch out an extra 1.5 inches to meet my wrists, or at least be bracelet length, which is what I prefer, so that I can always look at my watch. But oops, that's just because I was lazy and just stopped in the middle of a row and started the sleeves. I am very happy with this project. I'm very happy with how it's turning out, but this is 100% Aran American wool. It's a blend of, I think, Targhee, Rambouillet, and a whole bunch of other breeds. This is worsted spun. This is part of my Green Mountain Spinnery haul. This is their weekend wool in the color fawn. And I find it wonderful to work with. I'm a very big fan. If you have the chance to get Green Mountain Spinnery yarn, especially if you can visit and check out their discount bins where I got this, I really do recommend it. But this is a woolly wool. And it has been warm here. Maybe that's even sometimes an understatement. We've, had a few 30-degree Celsius / 90-degree Fahrenheit days with the humidity. And there are many days when having this on my lap just is a little bit unbearable. And even having it in my hands, I wish that I was someone who could really power through with the rustic woolly wools in summer. In winter, this is like soft or a neutral feeling to me. No problems with it. Looking forward to it as a winter garment very much. But I really have to only work on this one during cooler days, which is part of the reason why it's taking me so long. Also because it's an oversized cardigan, and it's just going to take a while, especially since I don't even remember how many stitches are on the needles right now for the body, but it takes a while. So this is something that I work on when I have the chance to, but I've also just had so many drop shoulder in the round projects in the past 2 months, including one that I haven't talked about yet because it's a finished object that I will talk about in the next video next week, but I've also I would like to say I've really enjoyed the construction of this. But all of the purling has been aggravating my elbow because I'm a Portuguese purler, which means I use my thumb kind of, and it automatically brings my arms in a little bit more, which is then again a fight to keep my elbows in a position where I'm not going to give myself a repetitive stress injury. It's even now having it on my lap is kind of uncomfortable, and it's a little bit of a cooler day. It's in the high 70s / like around, I guess, 25 Celsius, and this is just not a very comfortable sensation for me, but I love the yarn. I love the pattern. I know the boat has sailed on me really wearing this probably at all this summer, and so it's not an urgent priority for me to finish, and so I just put in a couple rows here and there when I can. And because my projects next week have a lot of purling involved, I'm trying to space and urgent deadlines. I am not pushing myself to work on this one, which is every other row is a purl row, when it's just not urgent, and I don't want to make myself dislike it by forcing myself to knit just because it's currently wet. So, Field Day Jacket by Ozetta, I recommend. I really like how the neckband is looking. I really enjoyed the shaping of the back. I liked the sleeves. I did knit the sleeves. I picked up the pace for the shaping. I reduced the interval of plain stockinette between decreases because I tried it on when it was about here as best as I could around my literal cable of live stitches and around the body. And I realized it was just way too wide. And with how short my arms are, I knew it was going to be too long on me with the suggested rate of decreases, so I did that a little bit faster. And then there's not supposed to be any shaping for the cuff. You don't do any rapid decreases here, and you're not supposed to go down a needle, or it's not in the pattern to go down a needle size for the ribbing, but I did a knit 2 together every 4th stitch right before I went into the ribbing, and I went down 1 needle size from a 5mm to a 4.5 for the cuff, just because right now it's very warm, but in the winter I live in a very cold climate. There's so few things in the winter that are as deeply unpleasant and that make me as unhappy as when you're wearing a coat or a cardigan or something that's meant to keep you warm and you have your arm up for any reason and the wind goes down your sleeve in the cardigan and straight to your body. Awful feeling. And so I like to have just a little bit of a why am I forgetting this word? So I did some decreasing to cause this to cinch in a little bit, so I would have a tighter cuff to avoid that, so that the wind can't go straight down my sleeve, because I've been there and it's just one of those things that makes me want to go back home and into bed. And everything in the winter is a fight to have the energy to do the things that I need to do to be a person. So that is, I guess, the one whip that I'm going to show you for this one. Are there any that make sense to show you now instead of in the next video? No, I don't think so. I think they all make sense thematically together in the next one. So I guess this has really just been a finished, small, scrappy, finished object parade. But that brings me to acquisitions, and I'm really not supposed to have many acquisitions. I didn't spend any money on them, but I knew I was going to get a lot of yarn for my birthday, or I suspected it, because ever since I started crafting with yarn, I have kind of, not only, but yarn has been the vast majority of the gifts I have received. No complaints there from me, as far as I'm concerned. Fantastic. Having so many people give me yarn as a gift, or very often gift cards for yarn stores, has in a lot of ways supported this hobby and I guess de facto this channel. But I did get some yarn for free, because there were a whole bunch of people moving in my neighborhood, and a whole bunch of people at different points have done de-stashes where they've offered up some of their yarn for free. And I took them up on those offers. I, from one person, did a major de-stash, and I went and I got 3 different types of yarn. So the very first is, okay, it was originally a cone, and then I wound it up into 3 separate little entities, this cone and these 2 cakes, because I'm going to hold these 3 together, hold it triple, and knit a pillow cover for a very thin pillow that we have on the couch, that's kind of not thick enough to be properly pillowy, and also so we can have a cover that we can take off and wash because we eat on the couch. If you watched my last podcast episode, you'll remember me telling you about that pillow and saying that I picked up yarn from a different neighbor to knit that cover out of. But in that time since, I had a new roommate move in, and she brought a bunch of decor for the living room that kind of made that color yarn not make sense for the pillow anymore. And so when I saw this incredibly fluorescent, flamingo-y, corally, sorry, I knocked over sunscreen on the floor. It didn't spill. This flamingo-y, corally, bright pink. Let's go for the pillow. Our new blankets that she brought are a gold color. They're like a very bright, yellowy, bronzy, goldy color. And we have blue couches. And I guess now we just have a very nice and bright and cozy living room. And so these warm tones and this like very, very vibrant yarn complements that perfectly. So this is a pretty, not urgent, this is one of the cast-ons that I'm waiting for and I'm very excited about once I get some of the 5 projects that are currently off my needles. But 2 of those things are gift knits, and so those take up most of my attention right now. I also got these 2 skeins of banana fiber from this neighbor. Again, I keep trying to show you things over here, but you guys are over here. And this is just so incredibly interesting to me. This is so heavy. And it's quite unevenly spun. This is looking like a bit more of a firehouse red or a brick red on camera, which is really a shame because there's so much more depth and variation in this color in person. Maybe I'll be able to show you guys better. Oh, can you kind of start to see it there? Like the different strands they're different shades of red and deep reds and bright reds and bordering on pinks. I wish you guys could see that. And I saw this, and I've never knit with anything even remotely like banana fiber. It's made in Nepal. I think that's really cool. And I've researched a little bit about banana fiber even before this, and it's very, very sustainable. And often it's made by local communities in other parts of the world, like smaller artisans, but it's a very, very rough fiber, and it's traditionally often been used for making like floor mats and baskets and things like that. And so it's not a very wearable thing, and it's also very heavy, it's very substantial, and it's very hardy. And so I'm going to use this to make a little floor mat for the kitchen because I think it will be really nice there, and we don't really have a nice little floor mat, and I think it'll be a very hard wearing thing. And I only have these 2 skeins of it, and so I don't know how far they will go. This seems to me to be closer to an Aran or a bulky weight. It's kind of like thick and thin spun, and there's no yardage anywhere on here, so no idea how long this is going to last. I'm trying to find a good rug pattern for knitting, but I'm kind of currently struggling, and I do think this is going to be kind of tough to work with, so I want it to be a stitch pattern that's not going to make it more difficult than it needs to be. So I'm thinking I might just do like a basket weave stitch and then cast on a certain amount of stitches and just see how long I can go until the yarn runs out. But that is again something that I would like to do sooner rather than later, but there are so many things that I'm currently knitting right now or really want to be knitting, and so I mean, let's see when that happens. And the third and final acquisition is from the same person, the same D-stash. It was so much yarn, we were so lucky. Are these 2 very light fingering weight cotton yarns. They're the same yarn, they're just kind of different points in the gradient, if that makes sense. Like this turns, see, you can kind of start to see the blue start to show up underneath here, and then the last loose stitches of this one is where the green starts. And these 2 are a Schochenmeyer yarn. It's, I think, 99% cotton and 1% spandex or something. And I know this because it was next to a whole bunch more balls of what was very clearly the same yarn in a different colorway, and those did have the label, and so I looked at it and I thought, oh, that's good to know. But it didn't feel right to take a label off one of the other yarns to remember what it was now, since I knew that I would remember that it was 99% cotton and 1% spandex, and it would really just kind of be to show you guys. So I know what this is. I think it's their Tahini, or their, not Tahini, their Tahiti line. I don't know if that's still on offer, if that still exists, but that's what this is. And this is just so incredibly soft. It's a really, really soft cotton, and that 1% spandex or polyamide, I think, makes it maybe a little bit more durable. I was briefly considering trying to make this into socks, but I don't think it'll have the stretch needed to do that. And so I'm thinking that this will probably be a little cotton tank top that I will knit, like one of Jessie May's tops, because I'm a huge Jessie May summer top fan, it turns out, at a tighter gauge, as a really easy breezy beachy tank that I will knit in the future, probably for myself, but maybe for someone else if one of my friends, I don't know, suddenly seems like they would suit this really well, where they see it and they like it. I think it'd be interesting. I think it'd be fun to knit. I think it would be something that I would get a lot of wear out of. I've been feeling a little bit more bold with color, if you maybe couldn't tell. And I'm really grateful to that neighbor for giving me so much of her yarn. But I received all of this yarn from a neighbor, and I received, if you remember, another 2 or 3 balls of scrap yarn from another neighbor a couple weeks beforehand, and the largest amount of that yarn I no longer really saw a use for, because it was originally going to be a pillow cover, and then now this is going to be that pillow cover. No idea the fiber content of this, by the way. It seems like it might be wool or it might be acrylic. I'm gonna knit a swatch at some point so I can get an idea of how many stitches to cast on for the pillow cover. Can you see how, sorry. but it's plied, but it's like, it's coming off the cone more like 3 threads that were just kind of put together as opposed to truly plied and twisted, which I'm really hoping doesn't make knitting with 3 strands of this a nightmare, but we'll find out. But I'm going to swatch to find out if it is a nightmare to work that way, and if I have to change my plans, and also to see how this washes and what it feels like. I wouldn't be do they make acrylic cones? Oh, and this was 200 grams. I weighed it. So that's really cool. My first ever cone. I've never knit with one of those before. But all of this to say, I received a bunch of yarn for free from my neighbors as parts of their different destashes. And then I suddenly didn't have a need for one of those yarns anymore. And I was really feeling a lot of spring cleaning, stash busting energy. So I went through my stash and ended up giving a bunch of my yarn away to neighbors because, you know, being part of a community is not just receiving, but also giving when you have stuff to give. And because I really just wanted to streamline my stash. So I gave away like some more leftovers or oddballs of like 90% of a skein of something that was good, but I had 1 ball left over, and the big thing of acrylic that I got from that one neighbor, but then also 5 skeins of my Knit Picks City Tweed DK, which has been sitting in stash for about a year and a half, which is this really, really nice tweedy wool alpaca blend, but I used it for my cotton grass jumper and I just kind of didn't need it for anything else, and I just kept not reaching for it when thinking about other projects. A garment quantity of cotton that I also bought a year and a half ago and just haven't gotten around to, and it ended up being like a really large grocery bag full of nice yarns that I just wasn't using. So I posted them in our community group, and all of it was picked up by different people. And that felt really, really good because, again, I have been the beneficiary of a whole bunch of really cool yarns that I'm really excited to work with and own and have in my stash. And I was able to pay it forward while also stash busting. So that was really, really nice. And so my yarn right now, even with all the birthday acquisitions, is condensed into just a few bags, and I have a project in mind for almost every last ball of it, and I'm really excited, and I know where everything is, and that makes me feel really good. So my throat is starting to protest a little bit, and that's pretty much all I think I have to say and to show you guys. So thank you so much for watching if you've made it this far. If you're one of my 2,000 odd subscribers, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys next week. Okay. Bye.